I'm having a crisis. I've been working on a project. I'm now in a mixing stage, looking back at the things I've done, trying to think about how they can fit together, and the only word I can come up with is mud. We've all been there. We've all captured sounds that we think sound amazing and then brought up the levels of all those sounds at the same time and just heard one big cloudy cacophonous mess in the lower mids. In this moment, I don't want to blame my own decision making. I don't want to think about how I know better, how I could have done some EQing on the way in, how I could have done so many things to make this mud problem go away. Instead, I'm going to take out all of my rage and frustration on the instrument that I love the most, the guitar. Let's do an example. We need an exhibit A. This is not a mandolin, but it's a lot like a mandolin, at least in its pitch. And listen to the sound of this. This is kind of like an E chord. Listen to those low strings. I don't care that they're out of tune. Listen to how little bass there is in those strings. How little low mids. This would be almost effortless to put into a mix. Now let's compare it to an electric guitar. What's special about this guitar? Almost nothing, but it is a guitar. And listen to this. Listen to how much lower that is. That's, of course, the low strings, but it's like all bass, all lower mids. It's the kind of shit that takes a mix and turns it into mud. Imagine if we didn't play these beautiful, polyphonic, resonant, purple wonders. Imagine if we played something like a mandolin or a banjo. Imagine how much easier our lives would be when we were recording or trying to fit into a band mix. I didn't always feel this way. I used to love the deep resonant sound of my guitars. I used to love the way that I could slam out beautiful riffs on those low strings. I used to love it. And then I got into recording, and everything that I loved about the guitar, it just became mud. Let me show you what I mean. Listen to that sound. It sounds like an acoustic guitar.
When I see you in the morning,
and when there's only a voice accompanying it,
when I wipe away
I don't mind the sound. But the problem is, it's never just a voice accompanying it, right? We want to add all these other elements. We want to add percussion. We want to add bass. We want to add electric guitars. We want to add hand claps. We want to add so many things that add nuance and grandeur and beauty to our recordings. But you know what happens when we add those things? We get this.
Somebody wake me, 'cause I'm too deep in orphan promises and loaded screens. Somebody wake.
A muddy, cloudy mess. You just heard me rant about the instrument that I love dearest in the whole world, and you're thinking, I listened to that mix. The guitar is not the problem. You got all this other shit that you added to it. You got this weird synth thing. It's taking up so much space. Why are you taking out all this anger on the guitar? Well, listen to what happens when I take the guitar out of the mix.
Somebody wake me. Somebody wake me, 'cause I'm too deep.
I hope that made my point, but in case it didn't, when I removed tracks 1 and 2 from the mix, I was removing really only 3 things. A cajon that's pretending to be a bass drum. A vocal that's supposed to be front and center, it's a freaking vocal. And an acoustic guitar. And when I pulled out those 3 parts from this mix, it went from being like a mudslide to suddenly open, detailed. You could actually hear that there were other instruments going on, performing slightly different parts, creating a little bit of like dynamics, the stuff that you want to hear but that you could not hear because those other parts were too present. And like I said, I'm not going to give shit to the cajon part. It's doing virtually nothing, and the vocal is supposed to do things because it's the vocal. The problem is the acoustic guitar. It's a problem because I screwed up. I screwed up when I was recording it. I just put some mics in front of it and ran those mics into a Porta Studio. I didn't do what I would normally do, which is apply some not just slight but severe high-pass filtering to the guitar in order to take out some of the bottom end. I know I should have done it. I know better than this, but I didn't do it because in the moment, that bass, that lower mid content made the guitar sound so big, so full. It made it sound like an acoustic guitar, and I am a guitar player. I want guitars to sound like guitars, like they sound when they're in my hands and I'm strumming them. The problem is, that's not what I'm doing here. I'm not just strumming a guitar by myself in the shed. I'm trying to make a mix, an arrangement of different parts that are supposed to fit together to create one sound. And unedited, in all of its fullness, guitar doesn't leave room for those other elements. Okay, I think I can think clearly about this now. I can't blame the guitar. I have to blame myself. I chose to record guitar at the heart of this song, and when I did that, I chose not to take out all of the body that in a larger mix was going to become mud. I even made decisions in the way that I performed the acoustic guitar part that were going to make that worse, like playing parts that were exclusively on the 2 lowest strings on that guitar. I could have done better, and in the future, maybe I'll do better. But I'm sitting here in a shed with a bunch of tracks on a digital Porta Studio thinking, how can I make this better? What can I do to get rid of this mud? If I was working in a DAW, I would just go to the track that has acoustic guitar on it and, I don't know, like turn it down or apply some EQ to take out those bass and lower mid frequencies that are creating the muddiness problem. But I'm not working in a DAW. I did a bounce that already contained the acoustic sounding exactly like that, the way that right now is a problem for my larger mix. How am I going to solve that problem? Well, the first thing I could do is scrap all of the work that I've done since recording that core track and go back to the cassette master I have and do a better job mixing it, EQing it so that it fits better in a future imagined mix. But the problem is that future imagined mix won't include all of these ingredients that I've since recorded because I haven't yet re-recorded those ingredients. And right now I don't want to do that. I don't want to re-record those things because in this moment, I like the sound of those elements better than I like the sound of this goddamn acoustic guitar. Which leads me, I guess, to option number 2, which is I could just delete the acoustic guitar. I could just remove it from this mix altogether, and if I wanted acoustic, I could just record it again. But the problem is, the acoustic isn't on its own. It's on tracks with other instruments. I can't delete it without deleting the other instruments. And do I really want to re-record the lead vocal and the kick cajon thing? I mean, those tracks were a lot of work. And not only a lot of work because it's hard to get a track that you're happy with, but because the acoustic part that's at the heart of this song, I didn't perform it to a click. I know, maybe I should have, but I didn't. And so the time feel is, let's use the word loose. I've spent a lot of time as I overdub more layers on that and making sure that they're synced up with the sound of that acoustic guitar. And I don't want to have to devote all that time again. And God forbid I try to do it when the acoustic isn't there, when I can't sort of hear the ebb and flow of my own playing. How would I re-record the vocal and especially the kick cajon? I feel like I'm left with door number 3, which is to find a way to live with this acoustic guitar part. But the question is, how? How am I going to do that? I did my initial recording in this cassette Porta Studio, which actually has a lot of the features that you would want to have available to do this kind of editing, like a fudging effects in. But I'm doing this stage in this DP03 SD, one of Tascam's digital Porta Studios, and they've sacrificed a lot of those features for, I guess, like a small footprint. There's some built-in EQ capabilities, but honestly, I've been really underwhelmed with those. I almost never use them. So that really just leaves me like with volume and panning to make this somehow work. And I have to make adjustments to those things, bearing in mind that I'm also adjusting the volume and panning of the vocal and the cajon kick sound. It's at that point that the video sort of goes off the rails, so I'm going to try to save all of us some time. Instead of showing you the footage that I actually shot, which is me hunched over a multi-track, messing with volume and panning, muting tracks, even diddling with the EQ that I already admitted I don't like very much, until I discovered something, I'm just going to tell you that I did discover something as I was messing primarily with the panning. I made an observation about how panning affected my perceived volume of the acoustic guitar in the mix. We return to the video with old me in the middle of an epiphany trying to explain what old me has realized. If you look over here at tracks 1 and 2, that's where I've got this core track that contains all those instruments. The bounce, I'm using 2 tracks because it's recorded in stereo. But in fact, of the 3 instruments that are included in that bounce, 2 of them, the vocal and the kick cajon, are dead center. Well, those two tracks were dead center, basically mono. Why did I do a stereo bounce? It's because the acoustic guitar is not. Okay, let's go back to like Sound Sources 101. What is a stereo recording? It is a combination of two mono recordings. They're just mixed differently to create the perception when you put one on each ear that like one side has some features that are louder than the other. And in that case, they sound more like they're over on this side than on this side. But what does that mean? It really means that you've got two mono signals, one on each ear, and that they're mixed differently. And in this case, the left side has more acoustic guitar than the right side. I mean, my guitar is too loud in the overall mix, but it makes sense then that most of the loudness is coming from that left-hand side where it was mixed more prominently to give the effect of leaning to the left-hand side in stereo. So I wonder what it sounds like if I get rid of the left-hand side of this stereo mix, pull the right-hand side into mono. It's going to have a lot less acoustic guitar, I think, and maybe will give me the sound that I actually want.
I'm not begging, but I borrow more than I could ever pay, and I'll need it more tomorrow than I need, than I need, than I needed it today. I took a picture, but the truth doesn't fit the frame. I hang a mirror, but I'm too weak to keep it straight. At night I see you, but I can't make you say my name. How long until I am away?
It makes a huge difference. The acoustic guitar is way, way down in volume. You can still hear it. You can tell it's there. It's providing some of the timbral coloration of an acoustic guitar in the mix, but it's not interfering nearly as much with the other sounds that I want you to be able to hear in the mix. It's a compromise, but that's no different than any of the other decisions that I've made as part of this recording process. Every time you do something in a DAWless recording world, you're making a permanent or semi-permanent decision, and that involves compromises with your future self. I should have made more of those compromises when I started this process, and maybe I wouldn't have had to just like vent a bunch of rage about the guitar, the instrument that I love. But at least I found a solution and got to think deeply about the nature of recorded sound, of the frequency spectrum, and of how stereo works. And I suppose I got to make an extra long YouTube video. Thank you so much for watching it. Take care of yourselves. I hope you're doing well, and I'll see you for the next one of these, whatever they are.